1789. You ask any Frenchman what happened in 1789, they all know the answer.
1789 is very important for French people because it's on that year that they won their liberty, their freedom.
It's the date when people came to power in France.
1789 is the year of the French Revolution.
It's the most famous date in French history. Like 1066 over here, it's the one date everyone knows.
But the question is, why 1789? Why did the revolution break out then? There'd been injustice for centuries. The people hadn't stormed the Bastille before.
What was it about the year 1789 that made the difference?
This is the Palais Royal, once the Paris home of the Duc d'Orléans. In the 1780s, the Duke filled these arcades with shops and cafes. Pretty soon, the Palais Royal had become the in place to be seen. People met here to discuss news, politics, scandal. And they came to buy pamphlets, political pamphlets, from the print shops tucked away in these arcades. Our English traveller, Arthur Young, came here early in 1789.
Every hour produces something new. 13 pamphlets today, 16 yesterday, 92 last week alone. And this interest in politics, they say, is countrywide. Every printing press in France is busy, in praise of liberty.
Liberty. It was a bit of a buzzword in 1789.
And that was one reason the revolution kicked off then, because people were ready for change.
Of course, such talk hadn't come from nowhere. For 50 years, French thinkers and writers had dared push back political boundaries. They championed science over superstition. They questioned the idea of monarchy. They'd imagined a world where everyone was free. Meanwhile, French soldiers were coming home from the wars of independence in America. They'd been helping the Americans throw off the chains of British rule. And they too spread this talk of freedom and equality. One of them remembered.
My heart fluttered at the growing awakening of liberty, as we shook off the yoke of arbitrary power.
So why didn't Louis stop all this revolutionary talk? Why had he let the printing presses run out of control?
The thing was, Louis had a problem. He had to keep people on his side.
Why? Because he was broke. By the late 1780s, France was bankrupt. Bankrupt because of the cost of the American wars. Bankrupt because of royal extravagance. Bankrupt because the nobles, those with the most money, dodged paying taxes by claiming ancient privileges. The whole economic system was a mess.
Add to that poor harvests and the rising cost of bread, and you've got trouble.
People starving.
Grumbling discontent.
Ugly rumours spreading.
France was at breaking point. So rather than play the hard-nosed tyrant, Louis did what he could to ease the situation. He called for a meeting of the Estates General, a kind of national debating chamber. It brought together elected representatives from the clergy, the First Estate, the nobility, the Second Estate, and the Third Estate, the common people. The hope was that together they'd solve all of France's problems.
Not surprisingly, as the delegates gathered in May 1789, there was an atmosphere of excitement and anticipation. As one delegate remembered,
I was breathing new air. How marvellous that I, a mere citizen, should now be something in the political system.
but the question was, would their hopes be realised?
What follows comes from the diary of one of the delegates.
May the 5th, and the opening of the estates took place this morning. Once the deputies were registered, the king arrived. He made a very concise speech asking us to help bring order to the country's finances. But he said not a word on the constitution. He was applauded several times. I tried to see why, for certainly there were no grounds for it.
Sounds like he's disappointed.
Angry, more like.
Hardly surprising. All Louis wanted was for the Estates General to rubber stamp his tax demands.
But the Third Estate hadn't come to be a rubber stamp. They'd come to reform France. So they took matters into their own hands. They changed their name to the National Assembly and declared,
"It is the duty of this Assembly, and of this Assembly alone, to interpret the will of the nation. The throne has no power to overturn the decisions of this Assembly."
The king didn't take this lying down.
He locked them from the debating chamber.
It didn't stop them. They just found a new place to meet. The tennis court at Versailles, where they swore an oath. The famous tennis court oath.
We shall not disperse until we have established a just constitution, as instructed by those who nominated us.
Those who nominated us. In other words, the people. In one step, the National Assembly had turned on its head centuries of absolute rule in France. From now on, they demanded, the people would have their say.
It would take years to sort out what this meant in practice, how the people would govern themselves, how they'd keep order, and what part the king would play in the process.
But from the moment the National Assembly vowed to speak for the people, the king's power in France was broken. The French Revolution had begun.